always good when you take the microphone off mute. So good afternoon, everyone.
Hello, everyone.
Hey. Welcome back, Todd.
I thought I'd stop in, see how you guys are doing. You know, so Jason and I have been testing this and doing the tech check and all that for about an hour, and my internet connection keeps flipping out at the worst possible time. So the good news is you might get a lot of Jason if this keeps going. So you've been warned.
Not sure that that's the good news there, Todd, but you know we'll go with that for the moment at least. So let's see, we need to go ahead and flip over to the slides at this point, I believe. This is there we go.
So this was an idea that Jason and I put together. Jason and I have been friends for forever. I don't even know how long, 10 years, something like that. And been traveling in the SharePoint circles, doing the SharePoint thing. And we've both been kind of not sure where our future led us. And we both kind of stumbled into this whole hybrid and identity thing at the same time. And we both kind of got giddy schoolgirl excited about it at the same time. And so we were chatting a couple of months ago, and I'm like, we should do this thing. And he was like, we should do this thing.
That is going to be a very classic picture. Somebody take a good screenshot
of
that.
So for the next 3 sessions, Jason and I are going to be telling
just a moment.
all the great stuff about how to make sense of all this crazy identity thing for us admins in the Microsoft world. Right. So it looks like it froze up, but I'm back. So we'll go ahead and do this.
Perfect place, yes.
I try, so I do that podcast, every week, and I try when I talk to make really weird faces, hoping that one will freeze and I'll get some, so sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I'm good with it. So we'll start with my favorite slide in the whole deck, my vanity slide. This is a good one. So for those of you who've had the honor of not having to put up with me before, here I am. I'm Todd Clint. I'm a SharePoint MVP and have been for 9 or 10 years. I forget now. I'd have to count all my things. Looks like 9, 10, something like that. But what that is, that's a thing that Microsoft does that throws a bone to folks like Jason and I that have big mouths and like to talk in front of crowds and evangelize and support Microsoft's products for nothing. And so once a year, they give us a little pat on the head, a little tussle of the hair, and they're like, keep up the good work. So I've been doing that for about 10 years now. Do public speaking. Jason and I are going to talk about that later on, where you can run into us, speaking engagements we're going to be at. I've written a few SharePoint books over the years, and that's worked out well. Done a lot of consulting. I don't do as much of that now, but a lot of the things that I talk about and write about are things that I've screwed up myself or the customers I've worked with have screwed up, and so that's where a lot of these stories come from. My personal blog is at toddclint.com/blog. Go there. I tweet mostly admin-y things, some Windows stuff like that. In the chat room, for those of you that are on the recording, you're missing out on all the great chat. So by all means, next week, get in there. They're talking about this the glamour shot that I've got here, and there's kind of a quick story behind this. So I'm wearing a tie and a suit, and it's not a suit off the rack at JCPenney's or Walmart or anything. That's actually on the floor at the New York Stock Exchange. You can actually see it in the background there, the NYSE. And it was pretty crazy. I got to be on the floor during the closing bell ringing. The company my wife works for went public, and that was part of the deal. So I was really nervous because I don't hang out with the suit and tie types, and I didn't know how to act and what to do. So I went out and watched Trading Places a bunch of times, and so I knew the lingo, knew how to act, knew what they expected, and it all went pretty well. So that's the picture of me in the suit and tie. No BJ, it's not a clip-on. My wife tied it for me. And I'm also on Twitter, and you can hit me up at Todd Clint. I'm also monitoring Twitter right now. And if you'd like to tweet along and put some comments that aren't in the chat room, I am also following the hashtag Jason Stinks. So I've got a column for that, and that's how I'll know that this is germane to this particular session right here. And then if you're not already sick of the sound of my voice and the freezing, all that, I do a podcast once a week on Monday evenings at 8:30 Central. You can go to toddclint.com/netcast and find out all about that. Jason, take it away.
Alrighty, let's see here. Let me advance this slide here. We have control to move the slides around. It's very exciting. So that is me. I am the other guy here. My name is Jason Himmelstein, for those of you who haven't had the displeasure of meeting my shiny head at any one of 100 conferences out there that I go listen to people talk at or talk at myself. I am a SharePoint Server MVP as well, not quite as esteemed as Mr. Clint. I can count the number of MVP awards that I have. I've only got 2 of the little discs at this point, but it is a big honor, so I'm very honored to have been named SharePoint Server 10. Yes. I am also the Office 365 Advisory Services Manager here at Rackspace. So Todd has to put up with me not only in the community, but also at work on a fairly regular basis. And we do have a lot of fun figuring out some of these geeky technical things to go off and do, and that's where this whole thing came out of. I started at Rackspace, and we immediately started geeking out and went, wow, this would really make an interesting conversation to have in front of an audience. So thank you all for joining us for this. I am an IT pro enthusiast. I've been an IT pro for about 18 years now, dating back Active Directory, Exchange, desktops, Windows servers, the whole 9 yards. SQL as a very bad hobby, more as the SharePoint guy than anything else. I am a BI geek and generally a technology fanboy. I do like my geek toys. I write some, I speak okay, but I do smell delightful. So the hashtag Jason Stinks not really applicable today. I showered. We just moved into our new house and have a rain shower head. It's awesome. I'm very thrilled that came in our
Thursday already?
It is, yeah. I do it
Thursday
twice.
sneaks up on me every week.
Sundays and Thursdays. That way I'm clean for the weekend. I am a reinstalled Texan. So we just recently moved from the great state of New Hampshire back to the glories that is Texas. That was this week. I am a diehard Spurs, Longhorns, and yes, a Jaguars fan as well. So you can find my blog, much delayed as it is, at SharePointLonghorn.com, on the Twitters at SharePoint Elhorn, and I have a bunch of code out there in a GitHub repo at github.com/Jason Himmelstein. And amazingly enough, Todd, we're already behind. So I'm going to jump ahead. Let's do our quick shameless self-promotion points here. So Todd and I are both going to be in the same place at the same time for a couple of conferences, SP TechCon. You can use Rackspace as a discount code, $200 off a full reg. Come out to SharePoint-A-Looza, Branson, Missouri. I know, you hear Branson and you think as exciting as Iowa. It's much more exciting than Iowa. Todd's coming down. It's going to be a great time. We're going to have a good time. Not only is it a SharePoint conference, but it is also a music festival as well. So SharePoint by day, music by night. It's going to be a lot of fun. Come out and join us. It's a 2-day event. And finally, we're both going to be out at the Dev Intersections, the Office 365 and SharePoint Intersections Conference in Las Vegas at the end of October. You can use the discount code CLINT. It's shorter than Himmelstein. So figured we'd give Todd the credit for this. And it's probably easier to remember as well. So make sure you come out and join us also there. So.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to be more exciting than Branson. I'm just glad that people know that Iowa exists, that it's below. So, I mean, that it's even in the conversation. Shane, I don't know how many years I've known Shane. He's still not even convinced it's a state. That might have more to do with his education than Iowa's prominence, but I'm just glad to be in the conversation somewhere.
So, for a quick agenda, just to run down, today is the first part of a 3-part webinar because Todd and I decided that we can't do anything quickly. And this way, you get to enjoy our talking heads for 3, count them 3 separate sessions. Today is talkie-talkie. The second session is going to be an awful lot of demo. We're going to actually teach you guys how to get Azure AD Connect installed, up and running and everything. And the third session is going to be a lot of troubleshooting and fun experiences that we've had as well. But today's agenda is the history lesson. By the way, in the resources section, you can find the registration links for part 2 and part 3. Make sure you sign up for those so you'll get notified. Though, you'll get the emails about them. And if you're not able to make it, you'll still get the emails that tell you when you can download it when that's ready. So today's agenda, we're going to do a quick history lesson, quick We don't do anything quick, to be honest. We're going to define some terminology. We're going to go through some Active Directory core concepts and concerns. We'll talk about topology and security and some use cases. And finally, we're going to give you some homework. If you want to follow along with us in part 2, you're going to need to do some homework to be able to do that while we do it as well. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this back over to you, Todd, to, oh, I got one more slide that I have to talk to. So I think you heard us both say that we're IT pros. There is nothing devy about this talk. I hope you're not too disappointed. If you are, make sure you go out to the Microsoft Cloud Show. Recently, AC did an interview, that's Andrew Connell, did an interview with Paul Schaefline. It was a really great podcast. Go download that if you're looking for all the dev side of things. That's a great place to start. We're not going to cover any of the ON or any of the, the tokens or any of that stuff. Today, we're going to be talking about the infrastructure side of Azure AD Connect, the whole Active Directory world. So make sure you go out and visit that. Those guys do a really great podcast, whether you listen to just that one or all 88 of their podcasts at once, do the full consumption. They don't have as many as Todd does, 255 podcasts on the Todd Clint page out there. So go catch up on a whole history. But for us, Todd, you want to take us through some history?
Yeah. So I want to mention that we're going to be covering the IT Pro side, also known as the fun side of Azure AD. So once you've consumed all this, and go back to their thing, compare and contrast. I don't have the sexy accent that CJ does. He's a Kiwi. The other thing that's interesting about that podcast is none of them go by their full names. We all know CJ and AC, but we don't. I think they're hiding something. There's something hinky going on there. So part of, Jason and I have been doing the SharePoint thing for quite a long time, and part of our excitement over this hybrid options that we have in the Azure AD stuff is historical perspective. We've seen a bunch of things, we've done a bunch of things, and where we're at now is just crazy in contrast. So I wanted to spend some time talking about where we came from. And I started out as the chimp there, and Lord knows if I had that spear, I'd poke my own eye out, so that's probably not good. So we kind of wanted to talk about how we arrived where we were. So I started out with SharePoint. I've been doing all of the SharePoints. So I started out with SharePoint 2001 and 2003 and all that kind of stuff. And SharePoint 2003 and 2007 were where SharePoint kind of got to be a big deal and got to be a thing that businesses wanted and people got excited about. But we look back now as kind of the dark ages. So not quite as bad as slaying dragons, but pretty close. SharePoint grew out of a small group collaboration tool. That's what it was originally designed to do, and it does that great, and that's still collaboration, documents, and sharing, and all that kind of stuff. It's the thing that it does the best. And it also did AD, Windows Identities the best, because that's what it started doing. And with SharePoint 2003 and 2007, that's what we had. Worked great for small groups, worked great for collaboration, not so much for anything besides that. But SharePoint 2003 and 2007 is when people really started wanting to use SharePoint and stretch its legs and that kind of stuff. And then this idea of extranets came up. And that was one of the two problems. One of my favorite problems when setting up SharePoint 2003 or 2007 for people was giving it short URLs, HTTP portal or HTTP SharePoint or HTTP Moss. And people saying this will never need to be accessible from the internet. We will never do that. And then 6 months later, that's exactly what they needed to do. And part of that was obviously URL namespace, but part of it is also usernames. So if you've got extranets, and I worked at a company that had an extranet for a while, where do those users go? In SharePoint 2003 and 2007, we really didn't have any good options. We could either add those people to our Windows Active Directory, which was terrifying because then potentially they could come into our office and sit down at a desk and log in, or any of the other things that we had exposed to the internet they could log in to. So then we had this other idea of setting up a trust and putting all of the external users in a trust and having all the internal users in our internal domain. But then SharePoint gets sort of confused. Where do you put SharePoint? Where are the security boundaries? So that wasn't a great setup either. And so I had one place that I worked where we had this extranet set up, and we had trust set up, and we had our SharePoint machines. I don't remember which domain we had them in at that point. But all of our external users were in one domain. We'll call that external. And all the internal users were safe and tucked away in another domain. And we would have users go into SharePoint, internal users, and they would add everybody, thinking they were adding all the people in the company. But in the background, SharePoint was adding authenticated users. So what these users didn't realize is, yes, they were adding everybody in the company. That was good. But they were also adding the 10,000 other people that didn't work at our company that could log in with their extranet accounts. And those were the kind of problems that we had in SharePoint 2003 and 2007. And there was no good way back then to monitor for that or check any of that. So I ended up having to do a very bad thing, a thing that I would deny. If any of you ever ask in front of it, I will deny it to my death. I would have to do a SQL query like once a week and look for that token to see where all authenticated users have been given permission so that I could go into SharePoint and take it out and then tell them. But that was what the state of authentication was back then. So with SharePoint 2007, things got a little bit better. We had the option for adding ASP.NET pluggable authentication providers, and that opened up the ability to authenticate with anything that was besides just Windows. But that had some caveats to it, and it didn't end up being great for a lot of people. One of the big problems was it was all or nothing for a web app. So, a web app being, one URL namespace. If you decided you wanted to have some FBA users, the entire web app had to be FBA users. And what made that even worse was that to SharePoint, a Windows user with FBA is different than a Windows user that comes in from Windows. So there was, user mismatch, and it was kind of ugly. The other thing is there weren't great tools for it, for managing it. And most of us used that ASP.NET SQL database, and that was the easy one to set up, and there were some third-party tools and things like that. But there were some security issues. So one of the things that's been in the news here the last couple of weeks is all these breaches that have been happening with online places. One of them was a little website that I'd never heard of until a couple of weeks ago, Ashley Madison. I have no idea what they do. I've never heard of it. I just saw the headline and all that. But one of the things that happened was their user database got pulled, and it wasn't encrypted. And so the bad guys pulled out username and credit cards. But that was another thing that we did back then. We just didn't know to encrypt that database. So
That's a site like Melissa and Doug, right? One of those.
well, wedding site. I think it's two sisters, Ashley and Madison. I don't know. They sound very. I don't know. Never heard of it before. I might have made it up. So that's what kind of where we were at in 2007. We had these big dreams for SharePoint, but no good way to execute on them. So then we went into kind of a renaissance, kind of our age of enlightenment with SharePoint 2010. And SharePoint 2010 also had this pluggable authentication provider support, but it added the ability to have multiple authentication providers per web app. So now you could have your internal folks on the Windows domain, your external folks authenticating against an unencrypted SQL database, or Facebook or Live or whatever, or some custom thing you wrote, anything you wanted. So that was good. The experience wasn't great. You kind of got this drop down, or you had to write some crazy things in the login page, the picker page, but things were moving forward. SharePoint Online as a product was getting to be a big deal, and Microsoft was starting to feel the need for better authentication. They also introduced claims-based authentication in SharePoint 2010, but I like to tell folks that claims was kind of in beta in SharePoint 2010. It just didn't work, and a lot of things didn't work with it, despite the fact they told you should do claims. Not in 2010, you really shouldn't have. And so there was all kinds of problems with that also. And Jason, our notes say that you have a horror story for this.
Yes, my shudder of the horrible claims world of 2010. We were in the TAP for 2010. I was working with some brilliant developers and decided we were going to have a custom STS. We were going to go claims, all claims, because we were working for in DoD space at the time, and thought that was a brilliant idea to go off that direction. It was not a good idea. It was just bad. And finally, after about 9 months of opening tickets with Microsoft, being on the phone with product team members, and just complaining and crying, I would cry myself to sleep on a fairly regular basis. It was not enlightened for me at all. I was still with the bell ring, bring out your dead, ringing the bell. They finally gave us what was the list of things that didn't work with claims. So in 2010, it was not claims first. It was claims maybe, and none of the BI stuff worked. Yeah, it was, and not even that. It was claims you'd call in and you'd talk to people at Microsoft, and maybe you would have a shot at finding somebody who actually understood what you were talking about with claims. They thought you were asking to claim software keys at the time. It was just a bad experience. So for me, I still have scars dating back to those horrible calls with Microsoft. And finally we got the list of what didn't work with claims. So moving on into the age of 2013, we got to the age, for us it's the age of the internet, and now it's claims first. And when I got told that, I just about put down and my badge and said, I'm out, no thank you, let me take my ball and go home. I've lived through claims before. I'm not prepared to go through that nightmare again. In fact, they did a good job with it. I was very impressed. Claims was the default now. And in order to actually create a web app that was not claims based auth, you have to go in through PowerShell in order to do it. It was almost deprecating the old way. So for 2013, claims became the new black. Orange now is the new black, but at that point it was it was claims as the new black, and that was the way we were going, and it made life a lot easier. So doing Windows claims was the way that we started out, and looking at the world, it was the right choice. Now that we're looking more at SharePoint Online, we're looking at all the things that we're going to be talking about today. Claims definitely helps set us up for success with regard to all of those things. It fixed a lot of the plumbing problems that we had. There were still some bugs. Microsoft doesn't do anything without giving us the option of something to fix, something to augment, something to have to call them. It's like a needy family member who just wants to hear from you every once in a while. I'll send you the recipe, but I'm only going to send you 8 out of the 10 ingredients. You have to call me in order to get the last 2, just so that we can keep that relationship going. And honestly, sometimes you figure out one of those ingredients for yourself, and it's even tastier than they thought. So now, we got to this age, and things are, in my opinion, much better than it was. So yes, thanks to Al Gore for inventing the internet and giving us this wonderful age that we finally got to. I'm looking forward to 2016. I don't know what image we're going to come up with to talk about 2016 with. I'm still waiting for my flying car and jetpack, so I don't think we can use those images yet. But we do have a hoverboard, Todd. Maybe that's what we could use for that. So.
Yeah, and I will say the Al Gore inventing the internet jokes never get old. Just never. We've been telling those jokes for 15 years, and they are as fresh and funny today as they were 15 years ago. But I will say, the age of the internet, one of the big things that makes this important is the fact that Microsoft has SharePoint Online. And so all of these problems that Jason and I and people like us have been going with them for the last 10 years, now they're experiencing them, and now things like claims are really being a big deal. So that's, it's exciting times. It's exciting times. So let's, as much as Al is a handsome devil, we'll sit back for a minute and, all right, good. So again, today is we're going to kill you with slides and bad jokes and all that. And before we do that, for the horrendousness of the jokes to truly be appreciated, we need to kind of hit some terminology stuff. Make sure we're all talking about the same things. And also, I think Jason did a bang-up job on the images for these slides, so flat for that. Very good one. So for terminology, there's going to be a bunch of stuff that we're going to be talking about here for the next couple of weeks. The first one is Active Directory, and when you see it without anything in front of it, assume that it's Windows Active Directory. It's on-prem Active Directory. There is a term, I can't remember where I heard it, retronym. And a retronym is a name that you give something because something new has made it more ambiguous. Like before the invention of electric guitars, acoustic guitars were just called guitars. And then people invented electric guitars, and the phrase guitar was, not specific enough, so they came up with the retronym acoustic guitar. And so that's kind of what, with Active Directory, we've come up with the retronym Windows Active Directory, or on-prem Active Directory. But that's your on-prem thing. And that's the thing that we've been playing with since Windows 2000. And most of the ADs that we're dealing with these days are probably close to that old. I mean, they probably were installed shortly after Windows 2000 came out, and they've just been, growing and becoming these huge lumbering beasts over the last 15 years. If most of you are in the same boat that I am, your Active Directory has been molested by an endless number of mergers and acquisitions and things, all that grumpy grumpy administrators that didn't know what they were doing, things like that. And while Microsoft has done a great job keeping it fresh and exciting, it's kind of gotten a little scary as well. And so there's just a lot more features, things like that, but it's gotten more complicated. And I know Jason's gotten bitten by some changes that have happened with AD over the years. Why don't you tell him one of those while I try to unfreeze my video? Oh, there I go.
Oh, we're back. All right. Well, back in my former life, before SharePoint, the BSP days, I was actually on the road working for a third party to Microsoft and Dell, doing upgrades from NT4, the NT4 directory world, into Active Directory. And companies would have the NT4 domain controller sitting under administrative assistant. Back then they were called secretaries. Today we refer to them as administrative assistants, under the admin's desk. So I personally migrated hundreds of customers from NT4 domains into Active Directory. And I'm willing to bet that a lot of those customers are still running on the very solid, knock on wood, Active Directory servers that I stood up for them. In this world, we came along, and I will get some other terms here in a few minutes about FSMA roles and things like that, where we got into the flexible single master of operations space to give us more dynamic capability behind Active Directory and schema extensions, all of this really good stuff that backs the Microsoft technologies that we all know and love. But honestly, how many of you have gone out there and purged all of the old users that don't work at the company anymore, and have someone dedicated to making sure that those things get turned off, and not only just shut down, but they no longer are in the gal anymore after they've been gone for 3 years, that you've actually gone and deleted those users because they don't need to be there after that period of time, and we've gone off and migrated those docs, maybe archived the documents that were so important that they be there for. And specifically moving on to the next term here, user principal name, we went ahead and named or gave our UPN a .local address. So Jason at home.local. So Todd, do you have something to say
that was
about
the guidance?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the guidance for a while. Microsoft has kind of gone back and forth on that. First you want a .local so you can't be hacked from the internet, and then whatever you do, don't do a top level domain that's not routable because all this stuff breaks. And like, come on, guys, this is so yeah. There's people have even doing the right things. You get stuck in these problems.
So, the big thing that you have to do first and foremost before you can even consider moving into a truly routable world and to move up to Office 365 is to get those user principal names fixed so that they are an owned domain and, something that matches up on both sides so you can actually go off and do that. And Scott's got a great point on here in the chat room. We did not include that in the resources links of how to do the ID fix. That's a great point, Scott. Thank you very much. I know exactly which Scott that is, Mr. Hogue. Thank you for being here and posting that for us.
Yeah, so that link that Scott's talking about is when you start doing the thing that we're going to do next week, when you do your homework and get ready for that, when you start to do the directory sync, this whole having bad stuff in your Windows Active Directory is such a common, prominent thing that the tool that Scott's talking about, ID Fix, is listed right on the page in Office 365 or Azure AD where you download the tools to do the sync. The ID Fix tool is right there because every single person's going to use it because you're going to need to do this remediation on your domain and fix that. So it's a thing, and we're all going to have to do it. And the thing is, there are people, I've talked to customers like, nah, our AD is good. You run ID Fix, you run these remediation tools, and all this stuff starts coming up, and like, well, except for that, but everything else is good. It's a thing. The other thing is with the user principal names, we never gave that any thought because user principal names look like email addresses, and forever, since we started logging in by carving in tablets and stuff, everybody's logged in as domain/user, and that's just how we logged in. This whole idea of logging in with something that looks like an email address but might not actually be our email address, well, that was just dumb. Nobody did that. And now Now it's a thing, and now you've got 10,000 users in your AD that don't have the right one. So these are problems people are going to have.
You want
So
to
our
take
next
Azure
piece of terminology.
Go ahead.
Okay, so the next thing, Azure Active Directory or Azure AD is kind of the thing that brought this whole party together. The whole reason we're here today is to gush a little bit about Azure Active Directory. And Azure Active Directory is Microsoft's identity as a service, or I guess we can't say I did, I don't know. But it's identity as a service, and it's not just this idea that you throw a virtual machine up in the cloud somewhere, on Azure or maybe on Rackspace, um, and then run a domain controller thing. It's not that. It's an actual service. It's got REST endpoints, whatever those are. Developers get all giddy and silly about REST endpoints, but it's this identity as a service. It's this whole thing. It's got a toolbox and control panel, but it's the thing that makes all this fit together. And the whole idea behind this session and the next two is how to get stuff from your Windows Active Directory into your Azure Active Directory. And all of the Office 365 things and all of the Azure things that Microsoft has in their cloud are all on the back end Azure Active Directory, whether it looks like it or not. So if you just have SharePoint Online, you've got your users, it's Azure AD. Doesn't say it's Azure AD real clear. It's Azure AD. So you need to get up on that. The other things, we're going to talk about these more in depth here in a minute, but a couple of concepts that we wanted to talk about were DirSync. DirSync is an old tool that is kind of the old way. Like when my dad synced up his Windows Active Directory to Azure AD, he used DirSync. Maybe his dad did too, but that's the old way that you did it. And that was just kind of a dumb splatting of all of your AD and just splatting it up to Azure AD, syncing passwords, syncing some properties, things like that. Normally a one-way push, pretty simple, worked for a lot of stuff, but not everything. And then the more complicated way was ADFS, Active Directory Federation Services. Anybody who's tried to set up ADFS, before now, it's gotten better, but you probably have a lot in common with people who've gone to combat. Post-traumatic stress disorder is very common with ADFS consultants. But it's this idea that ADFS is a tool that's built into Windows that lets you federate identities. So take two different identity sources and log in back and forth. We're going to hit these a little more in the next couple of slides. But then finally, Azure AD Connect. And Azure AD Connect is a wonderful thing. And it is a new tool that will help you harness the raw power of ADFS and some other stuff. Mr. Himmelstein, would you like to wow them about their identity bridge?
So this is, you can find slides similar to this one out there on the interwebs that published by Microsoft talking specifically about what is Azure AD Connect. The purpose, and we want to be transparent that, we've borrowed some, repurposed some material from our dear friends at Microsoft because it's their product. We're here just to try and make sure that people understand what these things are. So you're going to see some slides throughout the course of this that, over these 3 sessions that may look a lot like they're glossy because Todd and I don't really do pretty. He's pretty, but we don't, you're going to see some Visio. That's our stuff. You'll be able to tell.
Yes, that'll be very clear. Yeah.
But very specifically, what Azure AD Connect allows you to do is to pull in, whether it's from Active Directory, from additional identity stores, from an external LDAP. We used to use Sun One LDAPs back in defense contractor days. And for those of you who still work in that space, you probably and still are using a Sun One LDAP and lots of other tools. But it allows you to do sync and sign on using Azure AD Connect. You can set up ADFS very quickly, very easily. I'm going to put some quotes around that, but it does allow us to more easily filter, handle, doing the right type of write back as far as the accounting is concerned. And honestly, it also allows us to enable all these SaaS apps and tools, whether you're using any of the, the Workdays or the Salesforces out there of the world or things of that nature. It allows us to and I'm not going to go into the dev side of this. If you want to hear that, go listen to that podcast thing that talks to the dev side of the world. But it does enable us to be able to authenticate both with multi-factor auth as well as having app-only credential authentication to allow our users to get in and use the Azure Active Directory to authenticate them off to third-party apps as well. So, Todd, anything else on the slide?
So I do want to say, so like Jason said, he and I don't do pretty slides. Any of you guys that have seen any of my slide decks before, the slides that I created myself, crafted lovingly with my hands, and the slides that I stole, because I only steal the best slides from other people, it becomes very obvious. But this one, we did, like Jason said, we talked to Microsoft. We did borrow this slide. We will give it back to them whenever they want it. They can have it back. We did just borrow. We didn't steal. But the thing about Azure AD Connect is all of these things that are on the slide, and all the stuff that we've talked about, ADFS and DirSync and all that, those are things you could do before, but man, were they tough. And they were way tougher than they felt like they needed to be. And Azure AD Connect is this new tool that comes out and just kind of makes it all easy to use. Like, I feel like my mom could set this up now. And my mom can't burn a CD, but I think she could probably do some of this. And it's what kind of takes this whole hybrid thing in authentication to the next level. So it's part of what got me excited about it.
I mean, the thing about Azure AD Connect that, to lump on to what Todd is saying is that, when I first tried to sit down and do Azure AD and federate using ADFS and DirSync and everything else, I got everything set up, and then I had to, get on the phone with 3 different friends who'd done different pieces of it until I found the one sitting in Australia who could actually help me with the last nugget, who had figured out all the little trinkets. He may be lurking there in the chat room somewhere, at Ciphertext, really, really smart guy when it comes to Azure AD. But, this makes it so much simpler, so much easier for us now. And that's part of why we thought this was the right time to expose this to people, because this is the right way for us to be moving forward, whether you're doing any of those external apps or, any of the scenarios that we're going to talk through here in just a couple of minutes, some of the use cases. Azure AD Connect is the right tool for you to get started doing that federation of identity. So Todd?
Yeah, and so kind of to hit it home, we like this slide too. In the old days, you had all these different tools, Azure AD Sync and DirSync and FIM and ADFS, and Azure AD Connect kind of takes those all together and is a good configuration tool. And it also adds there's going to be a new product, and I don't think Azure AD Health has RTM'd yet. I don't remember, or GA'd or whatever the acronym.
I believe it was a part of the. I believe it was a part of the GA offering. It was all out. It's all out there.
Yeah, so getting your directory to sync once is impressive, but not really impressive. Getting it to continue to work and stay up to date, that's a little more impressive. And the health thing helps you do that. And Scott in the chat room is saying that it has GA'd. So there we go. So shall it be written? So shall it be done? All right. So you talked a little bit about this. Do you want to? Is there anything more that you wanted to add to this one, Jason?
Yeah, so just taking a look at some of the core concepts of Active Directory. In order to properly do AD on-prem, you actually had to have some concept of what you were doing. If you did it fire and forget methodology, it would do everything install for you, and then when you got to Exchange, you realized, oh, darn it, I have to have Wins. Almost said crap there. I have to have Wins, and I have to run NetBIOS as well. Active Directory and integrated DNS, I have to have all of that, and I have to understand what I'm doing in order to manage it, and all of those things. And then, oh, by the way, I need to upgrade my forest, functional level and things of that nature. Things got messy, and that's where we ended up with these dirty, dirty directories, because people just don't know. As you started to, dirty directories. You started to deal with, FSMA roles being on, one server, which really didn't make a whole lot of sense, because it's meant to relocate those across your AD, so you don't have a single point of failure, and you can always reclaim those FSMA roles. But down the line, again, that's flexible single master of operations. A lot of people just don't know that they exist, and when they lose an Active Directory domain controller, that housed those roles, they didn't know to go bring it back. So now we're getting to a point where one of the things that was most exciting for me about Azure Active Directory, to be honest with you, is domain join of computers. So ultimately, being able to get to a certain point where I don't have to have an on-prem AD anymore. If I'm running Office 365 and I can domain join my computer up and my Active Directory is Azure AD, all of a sudden I don't have to worry about those things any longer. I don't have to worry about, well, I'm using Office 365 and I'm federating and I have an on-prem AD, but I don't have something outside. All of a sudden my connection to my on-prem goes down. Now nobody can get in on their smartphone in order to be able to get their email anymore. So things like that don't happen. So the Active Directory core concepts and concerns, also when it came to force level 2003, moving up to 2008, you went from an everyone group to an authenticated users group. And when that happened, some things that were relying on that everyone group for, kind of broke because they were relying on permissions that no longer existed because it wasn't an authenticated user anymore. They were computer accounts and different pieces like that. So we saw a lot of problems trying to move forest level, functional levels, especially if you just went from 2003, tried to go up to the latest rev. Good luck with that. Lots of cleanup that had to happen, and oh, by the way, you're now broken and things are in a really bad state trying to roll back. Good luck. The UPN issues that we referred to, that ID fix tool is great, but you actually kind of have to have an understanding of what you're doing when it comes to that tool in order to make sure that you don't break everybody's email and all of a sudden nothing is routing anymore and your routing rules for Exchange are done properly. And finally, around schema extensions, really good stuff in the schema extension world, but if you don't know what you're doing and you go extend your schema and now you have things that are out there and you go to do those upgrades, is it still there? Am I putting things into the schema extension world that really aren't where they're supposed to be? Happily, with Azure AD Connect, we do get some new functionality, for dynamic grouping and things of that nature. So lots of really cool stuff in that space. Todd, anything else to add, or should we go ahead?
Wanted to talk about a couple things. So Jason hit on the fact that with Azure AD now you can computer join to Azure AD, and I don't know why, but that makes me giddy and tingly in places that I can't explain. But if you've got Windows 10, which started trickling out to machines yesterday, one of the options inside of Windows 10, you can have it in a work group like we've always been able to do. You can add it to a corporate domain, like or a Windows Active Directory domain, like we've always been able to do. But now you can connect Windows 10 to an Azure AD domain. And the benefit of that is the same benefits of having a local domain, consolidated user space and all that. But there's also a bunch of tools now in Azure, Intune, and those kind of things that let you control devices. And now that's all in Azure, and you don't have to worry about AD crashing. So I don't know why I'm so excited. I've got a couple of Windows 10 boxes joined to Azure AD, and I'm so darn proud of myself, and I don't know why, but it's just so much fun. I just like it.
It's a giddy making kind of a thing for me. Having been an Active Directory guy, it was like, that was one of the things that about a year and a half ago, I was talking with somebody, who worked for the Azure COE, and I asked the question, I was like, so at what point is this coming? And I got the, can't tell you anything. Look,
Yes.
it was a very happy making. I was like, okay, I'll just keep waiting. So lots of really good stuff. So let's go ahead and move right along. Todd, you want to take this one?
Let's do it. So I think this one, I got a local copy of the slide deck here. Yeah, so this is kind of another section. We're coming on the home stretch, folks. For those of you who are starting to get bed sores or your ears are just, tired, we're almost there. We can see the end in sight. So we wanted to talk a little bit about a couple of the topologies that we're going to be talking about in the next couple of weeks and why you would choose them. The first one is one called same sign-on, and this is important because you'll see this referred to as SSO, but it's not necessarily the SSO you think that it is, which is single sign-on, but this is same sign-on. And the way that this works is you've got a couple of on-prem machines, or if you'd happen to have, maybe some stuff in a hosting provider. I don't want to name any names, but, a hosting provider. But you've got your SharePoint farm, and it's connected to Windows AD, and your service accounts are in Windows AD, and your user accounts are in Windows AD. You can, with a single box, you can drop a box on there, and you can push those identities up to Azure Active Directory with one machine. Now you want to have multiples for fault tolerance and all that kind of stuff. But once you do that, it pushes your usernames and it pushes a hash of your password, though that makes it so you can log in. But your password's not stored up on Microsoft's machines. But it pushes that out to Azure Active Directory. And now when you log into other things that can leverage Azure Active Directory, can use your same sign-on. So you're still going to get prompted to sign on, but the good news is it's the same one that you use when you log into your workstation or whatever. And when you change your password at your workstation at work, then that gets pushed up to the cloud. And then when you log into Office 365 or Skype for Business Online or whatever, it's the same username and password. A couple of folks in the chat room are mocking the Visio slide. Now, Jason and I were discussing this slide before when we practiced this, and I know that's going to come up as a surprise that we practiced this. But I thought this one was suitable for framing, posterizing. There was talk of people getting tattoos of this slide.
There are signed lithographs that are available for purchase after the session.
Exactly. We'll be at a table outside the show. You'll be able to. But and I don't think we need to point fingers at who made this slide or whose skills, but it gets the point across that you've got some on-prem machines. You've got this machine that you use to push your stuff up, and then you go through the cloud, and it's the same sign-on, and it syncs. And like Jason said a couple of minutes ago about attributes and stuff like that, with the new version of Azure Active Directory Connect, you can choose to push some of your attributes up. You can choose to push some of your users up. You can restrict it by Windows Active Directory group. I think now you can do it by OU. I think in the new tool, you couldn't do that in previous ones. And so one of the things I talked about at Ignite, I did a session, an all-day session on using OneDrive for Business. And to make it simple and and approachable to the average person, we just did basically the DIR-sync, the upload to the internet. And I talked about how you might want to do this out in phases. So you've got a company, we'll say 1,000 people, and you're going to be demoing some hybrid things and demoing Azure Active Directory. So you'll set Azure Active Directory up, and you might have a Windows Active Directory group called hybrid users or something. And then you'll tell Azure Active Directory, only push the hybrid users group up to the cloud. And that way you can control it, especially if you've got licensing and things like that. But it pushes it all up. You've got a lot of control, and it's really easy to set up. The Microsoft marketing material says it's 4 clicks. I've not actually counted the clicks. I'm guessing it's some number a little greater than 4, but not too bad. Galen in the chat room is asking, are there bi-directional sync options available? There are now. With the new version, you can do things like sync back password changes from the cloud, some of that kind of stuff, all options. And one of the great things about this tool is it's super simple to use. You can walk through the wizard and all that and set that up, and you'll see those check boxes. And the first time you set it up, you'll see those check boxes, and you'll be like, wow, that is some cool things, but I'm kind of scared about it. I don't know if I want to do it. And so you don't do it. But then if you want to add it later on, you just rerun the wizard and just check the extra boxes, and you don't lose everything you've done before. You just get to get to add on top of it, and it's great. Scott Hogue in the chat room posted a link to a resource that talks about how this works, and I kind of hit it a little bit at the beginning. What is not happening is Azure AD Connect is not pushing your password up to the cloud. What's happening is Azure AD Connect is hashing it locally on your premises and pushing a hash up to the cloud that's not reversible. And so if there's a chance that anybody got it, in transit, they couldn't do it backwards. It's not your password. Microsoft has been really cognizant of that kind of stuff. So another great example of this is Windows 10, again, which was released yesterday, has a feature called Windows Hello. And one of the things that Windows Hello can do is it can log you in by looking at you. You get a special webcam that does, webcam stuff. It does infrared and it does 3D. So it's called RealSense or something is the webcam type. But it will look at your face and log you in. But what doesn't happen is Windows doesn't scan your face and then upload it to Microsoft and they build some great big database up in the sky. All that's stored locally. So Microsoft is really aware of this kind of stuff. So read that link about the identity stuff. But again, this is the same.
Does that webcam have the on-air light? I'm just curious. Is that something that webcam has?
I think that costs extra. Jason's making fun of me because I do a podcast every week, and I updated some drivers for my webcam, and now my on-air light doesn't work. So like I'm obviously on air right now, and there's no lights on my webcam to suggest that. So he's laughing because we've done a couple of video conferences, and I actually cover it up now because I'm all freaked out. People are watching me at my desk, watching me pick my nose or whatever horrible things that I do. So thanks for telling everybody about that.
My first.
Um, so the thing about this DirSync and the same sign-on that I like is it's so easy to set up. It's so easy to get started on. Don't be intimidated by that. Do you have anything to add, or should we jump to the next slide?
Now let's go ahead and jump on to the next slide here.
All
Get
right.
more of our beautiful, beautiful Visio.
Soak up our magnificent Visio. Oh, so good. So this is the other SSO. This is single sign-on. So you've noticed we've added some new machines here. And honestly, if we're doing this, well, I guess on our next slide we'll talk about it. But we had to add some new machines. So we've got our DirSync one that's kind of pushing some things up. We've added a couple of ADFS servers, and these servers are servers that talk to the servers, and Microsoft can tunnel back in and get a hold of them. We've got a reverse proxy device in there to make that work. But the idea here is when you've got things that are consuming ADFS and in a single sign-on environment, when you go there, you get redirected to a page, you log in once, and then that drops a cookie on your system. And as you're going about your day and doing things that consume that same ADFS, it uses that cookie to log you in, and you don't have to sign in every time. So this is the idea that you sign on a single time, and it gets you to all these different disparate services. This is an advanced move. You're going to want to be hydrated before you do this one. You're going to want to make sure you stretched. Perhaps contact your next of kin, let them know what you're going to be doing in case anything goes.
So real quick, we're going to go to full screen mode on the slides because I think this might be a little bit hard to see. So Todd and my beautiful faces are going to drop away for a moment. We'll come back. We're still here, but we're going to go to full screen here. So Lyman, if you don't mind, flip that over for us so that everybody can see the gloriousness of the Visio here.
So this just in, so Lyman is saying on our back channel things that's actually something the viewers can do on their side.
Oh, so you still
so
have
it looks
to
like it's
deal
up by
with
the
us.
webcam. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So right above the thing, you get the little arrows. That's the full screen thing. But we're almost out of slides or the Visio stuff. So single sign-on, that's kind of the next move. The good news is if you go to all the trouble of setting up the same sign-on, that's actually the first step of setting up single sign-on. So you can't just bolt this on top. It's not wasted effort. But again, advanced, there's a bunch of security things here. You're probably going to end up needing to invent new swear words. It's a thing. This last Visio that we've got here is how you would probably do it in real life if you wanted to. And this is a highly available authentication scenario. It's the same concept as the previous one, but we've added backups for things. And it's important to notice the difference between same sign-on and single sign-on in this regard. In the first slide, if same sign-on breaks, if the syncing, the DirSync thing breaks, everybody can still log into everything. The worst case scenario is that if you changed your password on-prem, it didn't get synced up to online, and you can't log in with your new password, but you have to use your old password, things like that. Or, if your bio, where you updated it to talk about how much you love cats and how you're a editor for Cat Fancy or something, that might not get pushed up to the cloud. But everybody can still log in and everything works. With ADFS, if ADFS goes down, nobody gets into anything anywhere. And so it's important to have duplicates of things. A couple of web proxies in case one goes down, a couple of ADFS boxes in case one goes down. Because now we're in the big leagues. If anything fails, you're gonna lose access to everything. So we like this highly available one. Anything to add to that?
Yeah, so just from my perspective as an IT pro, this makes me happy with the redundancy there and everything. And you'll notice that DirSync is a single server. It's important to know DirSync is not something that can be load balanced in that scenario. So you notice we have 2 AD servers, we have 2 ADFS and 2 web proxies. Those can be load balanced. DirSync is not able to be load balanced. So just so you know that. And yes, this is an expensive scenario, but being down, a much more expensive scenario. If you're going to propose something to your leadership team to say, hey, we want to do this ADFS thing, the people who paid the check, make sure you propose the right thing. If they come back and say, no, too expensive, that's on them. But if you don't propose it, pencil sharpened, make sure resume is up to date, whole 9 yards, because you don't want to be in that situation where people can't get their email. That's a bad thing. So.
Yeah, and I do want to add to something Jason said. The DirSync box cannot be made highly available, but what you can do is set a second one up in staging mode. So there's this ability when you walk through the wizard, there's this thing at the end that says, we're going to do it, batten down the hatches, we're going to make this happen, or staging mode. And when you leave it in staging mode, it stays configured, it stays ready to go, but it just, it's not doing anything. So if you lose your main one, you can go in and just click that button and say, put you in, I'm putting you in, and it's an easy way to get up to speed on that.
All right, so let's move on to the next slide because we're coming close to the end. We only have people for another 6 minutes. Let's talk a couple of use cases, and folks, we'll probably pick up, we'll talk a little bit here, but in the next, we're just going to tease you just a little bit. In the next, in part 2, we'll make sure we cover use cases a little bit there as well and make sure that that's a nice topic that we go into a little bit more detail on. Todd, do you want to talk about the old environment moving to a hybrid estate? Or do you want me to start that?
Well, I've never turned down the opportunity to talk. So this is assuming, so we're breaking this down into a matrix when we were planning this thing. And part of it is people who have established SharePoint and established Windows AD and people who are going to be moving into new things. So moving your old environment up to the new hybrid estate is, your users are already logging into SharePoint with their Windows accounts, so you can't really drop ADFS into SharePoint because they'll show up as different users. But you want to get those users synced into Office 365. So, and I'll let Jason hit with more detail. This was.
Sorry, I was answering a question in the chat room. You caught me. Sorry. So yes. Todd, I don't know where you were in that statement. I apologize. I was mesmerized by the sound of your voice. And just it was
Well, it is soothing. I was just telling them that we kind of broke it down into whether SharePoint is existing and your Windows identities already baked into SharePoint, or whether you're going to be installing it. And so if you've got the old stuff, you can do the DirSync because you need your SharePoint users to keep logging in as the users they've been logging in as. Because if you flip over to ADFS, even if the back end of ADFS is Windows Active Directory, SharePoint thinks it's different users. So then you got to do the migrate user thing, and that doesn't catch every nook and cranny. So that's one thing to know as you're planning out your topology if you've got an existing SharePoint farm.
So when looking at new farm identities, as we're starting to look, whether you're just starting out and you're looking at, should I start with 2013 right now, or do I wait for 2016? The right way to start, because realistically everything's going hybrid. The future is partly cloudy. It's the best way I can describe it. It's at least a partly cloudy future as we look ahead. All of the really cool whiz-bang stuff is coming with a hybrid flavor to it. Being able to have the new cloud, the cloud search service application, which is going to be coming for 2013 as well. You're going to need to have some form of federation with Azure Active Directory. So it's better to go ahead and start that planning now and look at where do you live. Before you get started, make sure your domain is set up so that everything is there. Yes, I did. And lastly, the extranet situations. As we started to talk this through, Todd and I spent a solid 8 minutes arguing over the terminology that we should use, and then we realized, we really should explain this to people. So I'm going to go to the glasses here for the notes to talk about this. When looking at two different models of extranets, do you look at an on-prem AD using Azure Active Directory where external user accounts sync to ADFS and can access SharePoint on-prem farms as well as things that might be up in SharePoint Online? Or are you looking at an on-prem Active Directory using Azure AD where the user's accounts only exist in Azure Active Directory so that they're only accessing SharePoint Online, but they do have an identity that you have full control over and are able to flip and turn on and turn off? So those extranet situations are definitely things that you have to really examine and make sure you plan properly for so that you know where your user accounts are going to live, what they're going to have access to, and how you really want people interacting with those accounts. So Todd, anything to add before we move on to our homework in our last 2 minutes? Because we still have Q&A to do, I think.
Yeah, we got 1 minute for each slide. Let's hit it.
All right.
Lyman's yelling at us in my ear.
Yeah. So our homework. So when we planned this, we said we want to make sure that people have the ability to follow along. This is meant to be an informative tool for you at home to be able to gather this and be able to do this on your own. So in order to do that, in order to follow along with what we're going to do next week, same bat time, same bat channel, next Thursday, 3 p.m. Central Time, yes, you are going to need an Office 365 tenant. I'm going to use this hand, an Office 365 tenant. You can use a free tenant. You can go off and get a trial and do all of that. You're going to need an Azure AD. Okay? You can use the trial for this. And you're going to need 2 VMs. In order to do this, you are going to need an Active Directory domain controller and an Azure AD Connect server. You're going to want to keep those separately. And before you start, you're going to want to create that Active Directory on-prem, have all the right components installed there. I'll make sure that both Todd and I will probably post a blog article about what you have to do in order to make sure that's ready. And then you're also going to want to have downloaded the Azure AD Connect bits and just install them. Don't follow the wizard, but just have those bits installed so that we're going to cheat. We're going to make sure that we have those things done ahead of time. So you should be cheating as well. If you want extra credit, if you want to be able to go along and do the ADFS portion of this as well, you're going to need an extra server. It's going to be an ADFS server, and we'll have some PowerShell that'll, you'll be able to, spin up that ADFS role also, or you can just use the GUI if you're that type of person. In the real world, again, you would have 2 Active Directory domain controllers and 2 ADFS servers with a load balancer, probably 2 web proxies as well, but, and ultimately you'd want an SSL cert in order to be able to actually do that ADFS portion. You'd need that in order to make all of that work. That's the homework. We'll make sure that we post that. I believe I'm going to post this deck out there as well. Todd will probably put a link out there as well so that people can go grab and, those of you who want our Visio can have it. We give you full permission to repurpose that and use that. Please just make sure you give credit to Todd when you do, because he worked very hard to build those beautiful Visios. I merely drew lines and stuff and helped with that portion. So that is the end of our deck, and we hit the nail on the head. We came right in at 01. We went 1 minute over, Todd. I call that victory. I don't know about you.
Way better than I thought we'd do. I did want to mention that this is only a third of it, and this is the weakest third of the whole third. Sign up for those next sessions, 2 and 3. And Lyman's going to put the slides up for us. You've got how to get a hold of us at Todd Clint, at SharePoint Longhorn. You can email us if you've got things you want to make sure we cover. Hit us up. We're both pretty friendly guys. So thanks for sticking around.
Yeah, and we had amazing retention here. I think that it was you and your magnetic presence, Todd. That's got to be what this was today. So be sure. Yes. Click on the resources, go off and go register up for part 2 and part 3. Join us as we, attempt to humorously educate you on the right way to do the rest of this. I am sure that, Scott Hogue will join us in the chat room as well in the future to make sure that we have the right links to post out there. Thank you to him as well. Looking forward to that. And I believe, Todd, that we had talked about at some point after we're done doing our 3 parts here, that at some point we were going to jump on your podcast as well and do a recap also. And that chat room is just as much fun as today's has been. Thanks to everybody who joined us. So be sure to register at SharePoint Elhorn at Todd Clint. Thank you guys. And we're here for Q&A if there are any other questions.
Yep. We're going to kill the stream, but thanks, and we'll see you next week.
It might seem